other kind of trap that I see, particularly people earlier on in their career, is bringing emotion, being led too much by emotion. So I think, when especially for me in my career, and I see this in some people in the career, it's really easy to get caught up in the emotion of how you feel about something. So if somebody does something to you, or something happens at work, or you don't get that thing, you get really emotional about it. And maybe your reaction to it is emotional. What I have since learned is that in the corporate world, nobody really cares about your emotions, right? Like, to be really frank and
100%.
honest, nobody cares about your actions. People care about your results. People care about your solutions. People care about, what you're going to do. So I think one of the traps that I encourage people to get out of is, if something happens, don't just look at it from the emotional perspective. You're allowed to have your emotions, because, like, let's be honest, like, you need space for your emotions and you need to be able to process them. But when you're thinking about like how to navigate that in a corporate culture, think about what's the rational solution. Think about what's the outcome. Think about how you're going to pivot that, because that's the thing that can help you navigate your career. And particularly as a woman of color, I found like the emotional piece can sometimes backfire, because
100%.
I've had people be like, I think you're being too emotional about this, and I'm literally talking like this to somebody, right? But it's like
Yeah.
they have the angry Black girl narrative,
Yep.
and so it's really easy to get caught up into that narrative and have it be part of your brand when you don't want it to, because you're thinking a lot about the emotions rather than thinking about the rational side of things.
100%. That is so key, because you run into the angry Black woman thing. I've run into the you're making people feel uncomfortable thing. I'm like, I'm not even at 100 yet. I'm like at 55. And so it's just like, I've always, and to be honest with you, because you've been very transparent with me, is I still struggle with how to be my true authentic self, because I'm concerned that my true authentic self may be too aggressive, because I've gotten a kind of proverbial, hand slap on the wrist, or,
Yeah.
you made this person feel this type of way. And I'm just like, I'm just being me, and it's just whatever. So yes, I
Well,
get you.
it's funny that you talk about that, because it's like, especially in the corporate world, everyone talks about bring your authentic self, bring your authentic self. In my honest opinion, I don't think most corporate cultures are actually equipped to let people be their authentic self, because like there are just structures in place, there are kind of rules and norms that are in place that pretty much prevent that. But what I do tell people is, it's kind of like seasoning, right? Like, bring your authentic self and sprinkle the parts that work sometimes, and sprinkle somewhere else where it works. Like, sometimes you can't necessarily bring your full authentic self 100% right away, but you can start to bring that into a culture to get to a point where people start to know, like, oh yeah, that's you. And so you have to read the room. You have to know, like I'll walk
Right.
into a room and I can tell what room I can walk in and be like, cool, I can be 100% myself. And I know the rooms that I have to walk in to be like, okay, I gotta, like, probably only be 20% myself, get the room to kind of warm up to me, and then I can be my full self. And so I don't think it's an all or nothing. I do think that you have to figure out the spaces where you actually can be yourself and that you're
Right.
equipped to be yourself, and then
Right.
figure out the methodology of actually doing that, because
Right.
it does sometimes take a little bit of a technique to figure out how to do it, but 100% encourage it. And I think companies need to also figure out how to make
Right.
space for people to be their authentic self.
Well, here's a thought. I just thought of this, and I saw something on YouTube, because I watch more content on YouTube than actual television, and
Yeah.
I seen something about code switching, and they were
Yes.
asking a bunch of Black people, do you code switch when you get in a corporate environment? And then one person was like, no, I'm always me. And people was like, well, how do you kind of have to code switch to navigate? And I don't necessarily think it's a Black or white thing. I think you do it when you're around your parents or you're around your in-laws. There's certain things you would say that you wouldn't say. So what are your kind of thoughts on that whole code switching thing?
Yeah, I agree. I think like naturally we code switch depending on whatever kind of group you're with.
Yeah.
And I'll be completely honest. I don't think I would have been able to grow my career the place I have if I wasn't able to code switch, right? Like, and that is like a skill that I think I have learned to hone. That I always joke and I say I know how to make white people feel comfortable. I know, right? Like, I've learned how to do that. I know how to walk into a room and I can know how to make a 60-year-old man who's a senior leader feel comfortable to chat with me. That is something I've had to learn over the course of my career. I didn't know how to do that day one. I didn't know how to do that, right?
Right.
And so, but code switching is unfortunately part of that. And that's, it's the idea of kind of learning to play within the lines of the game. But I always code switch to the point until I could be myself. Like, I will code switch to get into the door. Then once I'm in the door, I'm going to give you my real self, because I'm already there. You can't kick me out now.
Right.
But you pick the moments and times when to do it. And unfortunately, in corporate culture, I do think people of culture code switch heavily in order to have to be able to kind of get through the doors they need to get to.
I got you. You did the Oprah Winfrey effect. And you know what that is? So Oprah Winfrey you obviously know her story.
Yeah.
Started off as a journalist, grinded her way up, got her own show,
Yep.
grinded the hell out of that, and then to the point where she owned her own network, and now she calls the shot. So I totally get the strategy, 100%.